A fully armored medieval nobleman, armed with a sword and shield, goes into battle against a vicious foe. But wait, what he is facing is no fierce dragon, fearsome beast, or rival knight. His enemy is a snail. Welcome to my channel. And today we are going to talk about fighting snails. We will explore this bizarre motif of medieval madness. That is the image of heavily armored knights confronting and battling snails, usually depicted in the margins of medieval manuscripts. As I alluded to earlier, it might seem comical to see these valiant warriors squaring up against such a slow-moving and defenseless creature. But the truth is, there is much more to these images than meets the eye. So let's get down to it. But first, if you like our videos, please subscribe. It really helps out. Alright, let's do this. First things first, let's break down where this motif originated and why it appeared in so many medieval manuscripts. By the late 13th century, snails started appearing in the margins of illuminated manuscripts. Those beautiful hand-drawn books favored by wealthy patrons and church institutions. Known as marginalia, these decorative drawings and playful images added a touch of whimsy to these otherwise sacred texts. Marginalia ranged from rather innocent to downright strange, featuring naked figures, medical ailments, and even violent rabbits. However, it was around the year 1290 when a new bizarre trend emerged, one that would last for only 20 years before vanishing as suddenly as it came. During this brief period, artists incorporated hundreds of illustrations of knights locked in combat with snails. Over the course of these 3 decades, approximately 70 examples of the fighting snail were recorded in 29 different manuscripts throughout Europe. Most of these specimens are from France, but there are also a handful from Germany, England, Italy, and the Netherlands. Interestingly, these snail pictures weren't just standalone artworks, but were instead random and somewhat incongruous additions to the pages they graced. They had nothing to do with the text, and seemed to exist solely for the amusement of the viewer. More puzzling still, these images don't seem to have any direct parallel in contemporary art. Medieval bestiaries, or illustrated guides to beasts and monsters, did contain images of fabulous creatures engaged in battle, but never with snails. Even modern commentators have had trouble understanding the snail's presence in medieval art. Now you might be thinking, "Okay, we know what a snail is, but why was it chosen to be immortalized in these works? What was the artist trying to say by putting a snail in the corner of a page?" Well, there are a lot of different ideas about that, and most of them are a little crazy, so buckle up. One of the most popular interpretations offered by scholars is that the inclusion of snails represented a form of social commentary. You see, the snail's greatest strength is its portable shell, allowing it to withdraw into itself and seal out the outside world. In the right circumstances, a snail can survive for quite a while without food or water, and it's very difficult to destroy. From this perspective, the snail's hardened shell was seen as a potent symbol of the plight of the poor and oppressed. In medieval Europe, where the wealthy and powerful made life miserable, for the weak and defenseless, the snail became a way to satirize the ruthless aristocracy, suggesting that even the smallest and seemingly weakest could triumph over a powerful attacker. Another theory proposes that the snail's slowness and weakness forced the knight to take a leisurely approach to battle, alluding to the sluggish passage of time. But honestly, that one doesn't make much sense to me, because there are a lot of other ways to represent the passage of time. Why specifically use a snail? So let's move on to another one. Some scholars argue that the snail held deeper religious symbolism, representing Christ himself. This idea is based on a tradition dating back to the 9th century, when the snail emerging from its shell was linked to the miracle of resurrection. This was particularly relevant during the Easter season, seen in a French book of ours from around 850 CE, where the snail was used to decorate an illustration depicting the raising of Lazarus. While this interpretation seems plausible, it does not adequately explain why snails were often shown as aggressive antagonists rather than passive symbols of Christ. So once again, it doesn't seem quite right. Still others maintain that the snail imagery had nothing to do with religion or politics, but was purely whimsical. In this view, the snail simply provided a comedic foil to the mighty knight, creating humorous scenarios that lightened the mood of the manuscript's serious religious content. These marginalia were essentially visual jokes for the educated elite, providing a much-needed break from complex theological texts. But there is yet another theory proposed by art critic Lillian Randall, who suggests that the snail motif was actually a clever way to insult the contemporary Lombards. If you remember from the introduction, the Lombards were a Germanic people who settled in northern Italy and eventually conquered the entire peninsula. In the centuries that followed, the Lombards faced a lot of stigma in medieval Europe. Much of this criticism stemmed from the Lombards' reputation for usury, a term used for charging exorbitant interest rates on loans, which was seen as sinful in Christian society. Medieval writers frequently lambasted the Lombards as greedy, avaricious, and godless people. The Lombards' negative portrayal in literature and art persisted long after their political influence waned. For instance, in the Smithfield Decretal, a 13th century manuscript containing important papal letters, the Lombards were caricatured as having rodent-like features, underscoring their association with vermin. Given this context, Randall theorizes that the fighting snail may have been a clever double-edged sword, simultaneously insulting the Lombards, while also amusing readers with a ridiculous image. After all, if the Lombards were seen as cowardly and despised, then portraying them as afraid of harmless snails would have been a subtle, yet effective way to mock them. Plus, the snail's association with dirt and disease aligned well with the Lombards' debased image. What's interesting is that these miniature works of art captured not just the appearance of the snail, but also its behavior. They often showed the snail extending its tentacles or horns, giving the impression of a fearsome monster or a grotesque hybrid. The snail, as slimy nature, and its habit of leaving a silver trail also contributed to its frightening characterization. Even today, we can empathize with the knights who, despite their bravery and skills, were confronted with a mysterious, slimy, tentacled creature that left them hopelessly stuck. Such an experience could easily fill any hero with trepidation. And indeed, that seems to be the case. In the manuscripts, some knights drop their weapons in defeat, while others flee or kneel in submission. Still, some manage to conquer their fear and attack the snail with clubs, slingshots, hammers, or even catapults. One particularly entertaining image shows a young boy taking aim at a giant snail with a miniature catapult, suggesting a playful allusion to the biblical story of David and Goliath, or perhaps making fun of someone foolish enough to mock humility. In the same vein, another manuscript depicts a fierce snail advancing toward a knight, who has fallen to his knees, surrendering. The snail's menacing posture, and the knight's humble submission suggest a satirical commentary on the dangers of pride. These scenes hint that cowardice and lack of humility were seen as sins, a lesson that medieval society clearly wanted to drive home through these illustrations. Speaking of the Smithfield Decretal, this important manuscript offers another layer to the fighting snail motif. The Decretals, a collection of papal bulls or pronouncements, covered a wide range of legal and administrative matters regarding the Catholic Church. In addition to the previously mentioned image of the Lombards as rodents, the Smithfield Decretal also contains a drawing of a battle between a snail and a knight, suggesting a connection between these marginalia and religious teachings. In one illustration, a large snail lunges toward a kneeling knight, clutching his chest as if to devour him. This image could be interpreted as a symbolic representation of Christ's conquering sin. Given the prevalence of snail imagery during the Easter season, however, in another scene, the snail is shown lunging forward while the knight drops his weapon and cowers in fear. This could allude to the temptation of Christ in the desert, where the devil tempted Jesus to turn stones into bread. But ultimately, the snail's ambiguous attitude makes it hard to pinpoint a definitive religious meaning. The fact that the Decret